The year was 1937, and the world was heading towards a global conflict. In Japan, behind a veil of extreme secrecy, an ambitious project was taking shape. This wasn't just another warship. It was meant to be the ultimate battleship, a floating fortress designed to dominate the seas. This was the Yamato, a name that would become synonymous with both awe-inspiring power and tragic loss. Its conception was born from a desire to counter the growing naval might of the United States, particularly their larger battleships. Japanese naval strategists believed that to overcome a numerically superior enemy, they needed ships that were individually more powerful than anything else afloat. The Yamato was their answer. Everything about the Yamato was unprecedented. It was massive, stretching over 860 feet long, with a displacement of over 72 iwazaru tons, making it the heaviest and most powerfully armed battleship ever constructed. Its main armament consisted of 9 18 1-inch guns, the largest naval artillery ever mounted on a warship. These guns could fire shells weighing over 3 pounds a distance of 26 miles. To protect this immense firepower, the Yamato was clad in an armor belt up to 16, 1 inches thick, designed to withstand hits from even its own colossal shells. This level of protection made it seem virtually impenetrable. The sheer scale of the Yamato was a testament to Japan's industrial capability and engineering prowess. It wasn't just a ship, it was a potent symbol of national pride, a steel manifestation of Japan's ambition to be a dominant naval power. Building such a colossal vessel required extraordinary measures, and secrecy was paramount. The construction took place in heavily shielded dry docks, with tall fences and canvas coverings preventing any prying eyes from observing its progress. Workers involved in the project were sworn to secrecy, and even the existence of the ship was largely unknown outside of high-ranking naval officials. This clandestine construction effort added to the Yamato's mythical status. Rumors of a super battleship circulated, fueling both excitement within Japan and concern among Allied intelligence. The immense resources poured into its creation were staggering, diverting steel, labor, and engineering talent at a critical time. Every piece of the Yamato, from its gigantic turbine engines to the intricate fire control systems, represented a monumental engineering challenge overcome. Before it even saw combat, the Yamato had already become a legend, a whispered name representing an unstoppable force. When the Yamato finally entered service in December 1941, just after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the world was already deep into war. Despite its awe-inspiring capabilities, its early service life was largely uneventful. It served as the flagship of the combined fleet, but its immense value meant that naval commanders were hesitant to risk it in direct combat. The strategic role envisioned for battleships was already shifting. The attack on Pearl Harbor and subsequent naval battles clearly demonstrated the growing dominance of carrier-based air power. Aircraft, not big guns, were becoming the decisive factor in naval engagements. This new reality meant that the Yamato, designed for a different kind of war, found itself in a difficult position. It participated in a few operations like the Battle of Midway, but mostly from a distance, never truly engaging enemy capital ships. Its massive guns remained largely silent. The perceived invincibility of the Yamato, however, had a psychological impact. For the Japanese public, it was a source of immense morale, a symbol of their nation's strength. For the Allies, it represented a formidable, almost unassailable threat, even if its actual combat record was minimal. This psychological effect, however, couldn't change the evolving tide of warfare. The age of the battleship was slowly, but surely, coming to an end, a fact that would profoundly influence the Yamato's ultimate fate. Its initial deployments were more about presence than direct engagement. A silent giant lurking, its true power untested against a rapidly changing world. The mid-war years brought a harsh reality to naval strategists. The early successes of carrier aircraft had matured into undeniable dominance. Battleships, once the queens of the sea, were becoming increasingly vulnerable, their heavy armor and powerful guns unable to counter the threat from above. Japanese naval strategy, initially built around a decisive big-gun battle, struggled to adapt to this new paradigm. The grand plans for the Yamato, designed to engage and destroy enemy battleships in a classic line of battle, now seemed almost obsolete. The very weapon that was supposed to guarantee victory was now a potential liability if exposed to sustained air attack. Despite its impressive specifications, the Yamato's combat record remained surprisingly limited. Its few sorties were mostly uneventful patrols or troop transport missions, far from the glorious engagements its designers had envisioned. The crew and commanders, proud of their ship, felt a growing frustration at its underutilization. They had trained for years to unleash its power, but the opportunity rarely arose. The strategic dilemma for the Japanese High Command was clear. Risk their prized asset, the largest battleship ever built, in a direct confrontation where air power reigned supreme, or keep it as a deterrent, a psychological weapon whose true strength was never fully tested. The decision was often to preserve it, leading to its nickname Hotel Yamato, among some sailors, a sarcastic reference to its perceived inactivity. As the war progressed, the tide turned decisively against Japan. Allied forces, particularly the Americans, pushed relentlessly across the Pacific. Island after island fell, bringing the war closer and closer to the Japanese home islands. The increasing pressure on Japanese forces was immense, with their resources dwindling and their once formidable fleet suffering heavy losses. The inevitable clash, a final, desperate stand, loomed larger with each passing month. The Yamato, despite its limited service, remained a potent symbol, but symbols don't win wars against overwhelming material superiority. The strategic landscape had fundamentally changed, and the ship built for a bygone era was about to face its ultimate test, in a war it was never truly designed to fight. The Pacific War had evolved into a brutal campaign of attrition, and Japan was losing. The American industrial machine was churning out ships and planes at an astonishing rate, far outstripping Japan's capacity to replace its losses. Naval engagements were no longer about single decisive clashes between battleships, but rather complex operations involving massive carrier task forces. The Yamato, a relic of an earlier doctrine, found itself in a world where its strengths were less relevant and its vulnerabilities dangerously exposed. Its very existence, once a source of pride, had become a burden, a massive resource that demanded protection and consumed fuel, both of which were in increasingly short supply. The strategic thinkers in Tokyo grappled with how to employ this behemoth effectively in a war that had left it behind. Its sheer size and power, once seen as its greatest assets, now made it a prime target for the very forces that had rendered battleships obsolete. The stage was set for a desperate gamble, a final suicidal mission that would define the Yamato's tragic legacy. This shift in warfare dynamics meant that the ultimate battleship was paradoxically becoming a symbol of a fading naval era, rather than a harbinger of future victories. The weight of expectation, the sheer investment in its creation, and the dwindling options for its use created an unbearable pressure on those who commanded it. The ship was ready, but the war around it had changed beyond recognition. The final desperate gamble for the Yamato came with the Okinawa campaign. By early 1945, Okinawa was the last major island barrier before the Allied forces could launch a direct assault on the Japanese home islands. Its strategic importance was immense, serving as a critical staging ground for the invasion of Japan itself. For the Japanese, losing Okinawa meant the war was effectively over, and their resources were dwindling rapidly. The situation was truly desperate, pushing the Imperial Japanese Navy to consider actions that, under normal circumstances, would be unthinkable. This led to the conception of Operation Tengo, a name that would forever be associated with one of the most suicidal missions in naval history. The plan was simple, brutal, and without hope of return. The Yamato, along with a small escort of light cruisers and destroyers, would sail to Okinawa. Their mission was to beach themselves on the island's coast and fight as a shore battery, causing as much damage as possible to the Allied invasion forces. It was a one-way trip, a sacrifice play designed to buy time, inflict casualties, and perhaps inspire a nation facing total defeat. The rationale behind such a desperate plan was rooted in the samurai code of honor and the grim reality of Japan's military position. There was no longer any hope of winning. The goal was to make the enemy pay dearly for their victory. to show an unwavering spirit of resistance, even in the face of annihilation. Sacrificing the fleet's last major battleship, a symbol of national pride, was seen by some as the ultimate act of defiance. The atmosphere among the crew when the mission was announced was somber, heavy with the unspoken understanding of their probable fate. There were no illusions. The officers didn't sugarcoat the mission, they laid out the stark reality. There would be no air cover, minimal escorts, and an overwhelming enemy air force waiting for them. Each man knew deep down that he was likely sailing to his death. Yet there was a strange mix of resignation, duty, and even a flicker of defiance. These men were sailors, trained to fight and die for their country. The Yamato was their home, their pride. If it was to go down, they would go down with it, fighting to the very end. Some wrote final letters to their families, others quietly prayed, while many simply focused on preparing their stations, finding solace in the routine of their duties. The ship, once a symbol of invincible power, was now being sent on a mission of ultimate sacrifice. Its crew fully aware they were part of a desperate final chapter. The morale wasn't one of wild enthusiasm, but of grim determination, a quiet acceptance of a mission that left no room for retreat. They were the chosen few, given the task of a final, glorious stand, even if that glory came only in the manner of their dying. The weight of this knowledge settled over the ship like a shroud, yet the engines still hummed, the lights still burned, and the men moved with a purpose that defied despair. They were ready to fulfill their duty, even if it meant their lives. The silence that often fell over the mess halls and decks was not one of fear, but of profound contemplation, each man coming to terms with the journey ahead. The morning of April 6, 1945, was clear, but held a heavy air. The Yamato, now stripped of much of its ammunition to make room for extra fuel, finally weighed anchor. With it sailed a small escort force, the light cruiser Yahagi and 8 destroyers. This small fleet, known as the Surface Special Attack Force, slipped out of Tokuyama Bay. Their destination was Okinawa, but their true mission was an almost certain death. As they moved into the open sea, the most glaring vulnerability of this desperate mission became painfully clear. There was no air cover. Not a single fighter plane soared above to protect them from the inevitable American onslaught. This was a deliberate choice, a grim acceptance that Japan simply didn't have the aircraft or fuel to spare. The final moments of contact with the Japanese mainland were quiet. No cheering crowds, no grand send-off, just the silent, knowing glances between men and the receding coastline. Each knot they traveled took them further from home and closer to their fate. It didn't take long for the Allies to spot them. Early on April 7th, an American reconnaissance aircraft, a PBM Mariner flying boat, picked up the task force. The discovery sent a ripple of alarm and excitement through the American command. The Yamato, the legendary unsinkable battleship, was finally on the move and seemingly unprotected. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, quickly ordered a massive air attack. He knew this was a chance they couldn't miss. The first waves of American aircraft, a mix of Hellcat fighters, Helldiver dive bombers, and Avenger torpedo bombers, launched from their carriers. They swarmed towards the Japanese fleet like angry bees. The Yamato's formidable anti-aircraft defenses, a network of over 150 guns of various calibers, roared to life. The sky above the battleship became a chaotic mess of flak bursts and tracer fire. It was a terrifying spectacle, a desperate attempt to create a canopy of steel against the incoming swarm. The smaller escort ships also opened fire, contributing to the furious barrage. The American pilots, though facing heavy resistance, pressed their attacks with determination. They understood the importance of this target. The growing onslaught was relentless. Wave after wave of American planes arrived, each one bringing more bombs and torpedoes. The sheer numerical superiority of the American forces was overwhelming. It wasn't just a few planes, it was hundreds, continuously circling, diving, and attacking. The Japanese gunners worked tirelessly, their bodies aching, their faces streaked with sweat and smoke. They managed to shoot down some of the attackers, but for every plane that fell, 2 more seemed to take its place. The sky was thick with the roar of engines, the chatter of machine guns, and the concussions of exploding ordnance. The Yamato, despite its thick armor, began to show signs of damage. The first direct hits were mostly from bombs, striking the deck and superstructure. These initial impacts caused fires to break out, sending plumes of black smoke into the air. The ship's speed remained largely unaffected, and its massive frame continued to hold, but the constant jarring from explosions and near misses began to take its toll. Water started to seep in through damaged plating, and some of the smaller anti-aircraft positions were knocked out. The battleship, once a symbol of unyielding power, was now a giant under siege, fighting for its life against an enemy it could not hope to defeat. The crew below decks, in the engine rooms and damage control parties, felt every shudder, every explosion, knowing their battle had just begun. The relentless assault continued, each minute bringing more torpedoes and bombs against the giant battleship. The initial damage, mostly superficial, quickly escalated. A heavy torpedo slammed into the Yamato's port side, just below the waterline, sending a shudder through the entire vessel. The impact was violent, tearing a hole in the hull and causing immediate flooding in an engine room. The ship's speed dropped noticeably as water rushed in, compromising one of its main propulsion units. Then another torpedo hit, this time on the starboard side, creating a similar breach and further slowing the behemoth. The American pilots, now fully aware of the Yamato's vulnerabilities, focused their attacks. Dive bombers screamed down, dropping armor-piercing bombs that punched through the deck plates. One bomb detonated near the forward main gun turret, causing a massive explosion that killed many crew members and started a raging fire. Another struck the bridge, wiping out communication lines and killing several officers. The ship's anti-aircraft fire, though still fierce, became less coordinated. Some gun positions were now silent, their crews either dead or wounded. Below deck, the damage control teams fought a desperate battle. They were young men, many barely out of their teens, thrust into a nightmare of smoke, fire, and rising water. With axes, hammers, and wooden wedges, they tried to seal off ruptured compartments, but the sheer volume of water made their efforts almost futile. The pumps struggled to keep up, their rhythmic thrumming a grim counterpoint to the explosions above. Electrical systems flickered and died, plunging sections of the ship into darkness, forcing men to work by the dim glow of emergency lanterns. The air grew thick with smoke and the metallic smell of blood and burning oil. The Yamato, once a symbol of Japanese might, was unraveling. The multiple torpedo hits caused a severe list to port, making the ship lean dangerously. Its powerful rudder, designed to turn the behemoth, was damaged, making it difficult to steer. The captain, Admiral Seiichi Ito, could feel the ship dying beneath his feet. He knew the end was coming, but his duty was to fight until the very last. He ordered the ship to turn, a slow, agonizing maneuver that exposed more of its vulnerable underside to the attacking planes. The crew's struggle was a testament to their training and resolve. Despite the mounting casualties and the overwhelming odds, they continued to load guns, fight fires, and try to keep the ship afloat. Men carried wounded comrades through smoke-filled passageways, risking their own lives. Some, trapped in flooded compartments, pounded on bulkheads, their cries for help fading as the water rose higher. The relentless pressure from the air attacks never let up. The Americans had found their target, and they were determined to finish it. The human cost was immense. Bodies lay scattered across the decks, some mangled beyond recognition. The screams of the wounded mingled with the roar of explosions and the groaning of tortured metal. Blood mixed with seawater on the deck, creating a gruesome spectacle. For those still alive and fighting, a grim reality set in. The dream of invincibility, the pride in their mighty ship, was dissolving into despair. They were not just fighting a battle, they were fighting for their very existence against an enemy that seemed to have an endless supply of aircraft and bombs. Each new hit, each fresh explosion, chipped away at their hope, leaving behind a growing sense of futility. The Yamato, once a fortress, was becoming a tomb. The ship was now listing severely to port, a tilt that grew more pronounced with each new hit. The damage control teams, their faces grimed with smoke and sweat, worked frantically to counter the flooding. But it was like trying to empty a bathtub with a teaspoon while the tap was wide open. The Yamato's massive frame, designed to withstand the heaviest shells, was not built to endure such a sustained assault from below the waterline. Torpedoes had torn gaping holes in her side, letting in torrents of seawater. The pumps, once mighty, were now overwhelmed, their efforts futile against the sheer volume. The list reached a critical point, making it almost impossible for the crew to move around the decks. Men stumbled, grabbing onto anything they could find to keep from sliding. The remaining anti-aircraft guns on the port side became useless, their barrels pointing uselessly towards the water as the ship leaned further. The starboard guns, still firing, strained against the increasing angle. The ship's speed had dropped to a crawl, and its ability to maneuver was almost gone. It was a sitting duck, slowly but surely being dragged down by the relentless attacks and the weight of the water inside its hull. Admiral Ito knew this was it. He could feel the ship's death throes. Then came the sounds that no sailor ever wants to hear. A deep, guttural groan echoed through the ship, a terrible symphony of tortured steel. It wasn't a single crash or an explosion, but a prolonged, horrifying shriek of metal tearing apart. The structural integrity, already pushed past its limits, finally gave way. The massive hull, once a symbol of unyielding strength, began to rip open, not just from the outside, but from within. Plates buckled, rivets popped, and beams twisted into grotesque shapes. The sound was deafening, a mix of high-pitched screeches and low, rumbling thuds as the internal bulkheads collapsed under the immense pressure. Water rushed in with a vengeance, no longer just seeping, but surging through the broken structure. The ship shuddered violently, a final, desperate tremor that ran through its entire length. It was the sound of the unsinkable ship breaking its back, the moment its proud, carefully engineered frame surrendered to the ocean. For those still alive on board, it was the sound of their world ending, a chilling confirmation of their worst fears. The Yamato, the mightiest battleship ever built, was not just sinking, it was disintegrating. Admiral Ito, standing on the bridge, watched the horizon tilt. He knew there was no more hope, no more fighting. He had to make the hardest decision of his life. With a heavy heart, his voice strained but clear, he gave the order. Abandon ship. The command, relayed through what little communication remained, spread like wildfire among the surviving crew. It was a signal for a desperate scramble, a race against time as the ship began its final irreversible descent. Men threw themselves into the churning, oil-slicked water, some clutching life jackets, others just their sheer will to survive. Many were wounded, their movements slow and painful. The deck was a chaos of bodies, debris, and the dying ship. Some tried to help their comrades, pulling them towards the rails, pushing them into the sea. Others, too injured or too shocked, simply stood there, waiting for the end. The Yamato, once a symbol of immense power, was now a death trap. Its decks tilting at an impossible angle, its remaining guns pointing uselessly at the sky. The final moments of the proud battleship were filled with the cries of men and the terrible, relentless groan of its breaking hull. The Yamato, now a twisted mess of metal and fire, finally rolled over. It was a slow, agonizing turn, like a dying beast giving its last breath. Its massive hull, once hidden beneath the waves, now presented itself to the sky, a dark, barnacle-covered underside, a final indignity. As it capsized, a monstrous explosion ripped through the air. It wasn't just one boom, but a series of concussions, as if the ship itself was tearing apart from the inside. The main magazines, filled with tons of high explosives and propellant, detonated with unimaginable force. A towering plume of black smoke, flame, and debris shot thousands of feet into the sky. It was a terrifying spectacle, visible for miles across the ocean, a grim landmark for the American pilots still circling overhead and the remaining Japanese destroyers. Chunks of metal, some the size of small cars, rained down onto the water, creating huge splashes and dangerous waves. The explosion was so powerful, it created a mushroom cloud, a chilling echo of the atomic age that was soon to follow. The sea itself seemed to recoil from the blast, a massive concussive wave spreading outwards. Below, in the churning, oil-slicked water, the few survivors struggled. The explosion had killed many more, either by the direct force of the blast or by the falling shrapnel. Those who remained faced a new horror, a sea filled with burning oil, debris, and the bodies of their comrades. The water, once a source of escape, now felt like a suffocating trap. Men choked on the thick black oil, their eyes burning, their lungs aching for clean air. They swam amidst the wreckage, trying to avoid being hit by falling pieces or sucked down by the vortex created as the immense battleship finally disappeared beneath the waves. The escorting destroyers, themselves battered and damaged, immediately began rescue efforts. They navigated carefully through the debris field, their crews throwing ropes and life preservers to the struggling sailors. It was a chaotic scene, a desperate race against time and the elements. Many survivors were badly burned, wounded, or simply too exhausted to help themselves. The destroyers pulled hundreds from the sea, but for every man saved, many more were lost. The ocean, which had been the Yamato's domain, now claimed the vast majority of its crew. Over 700 men went down with the ship, a tragic loss of life that crippled a generation of Japanese naval personnel. The sinking of the Yamato was more than just the loss of a ship. It marked the definitive end of an era. The age of the battleship, once the undisputed king of the seas, was over. The Yamato, designed to be the ultimate weapon of naval power, was destroyed by aircraft, a clear demonstration of the new reality of naval warfare. Air power, launched from aircraft carriers, had proven its dominance. The huge guns and thick armor of the battleship, once symbols of invincibility, were useless against the relentless waves of planes. This event cemented the carrier's place as the primary capital ship in any modern navy. For Japan, the loss of the Yamato was a devastating blow, not just militarily but psychologically. It was a symbol of their national pride, their technological prowess, and their last, desperate hope. Its sinking, in such a spectacular and tragic manner, was a poignant symbol of Japan's ultimate defeat in World War II. The mission itself, Operation Tengo, was a desperate gamble, a one-way trip that underscored the dire situation the Japanese military found itself in. The sacrifice of the Yamato and its crew highlighted the futility of fighting a war that was already lost. It was a final, tragic chapter in a conflict that had consumed the world. The story of the Yamato isn't just about a ship. It's about the people who served on it. The crew members, from the highest officers to the lowest ratings, faced their fate with a mix of duty, resignation, and bravery. Their sacrifice, understood by many as a one-way mission, left an indelible mark on their families and the nation. Each man lost represented a son, a husband, a father, whose absence created a void that could never be filled. The personal impact of such a massive loss rippled through countless communities in Japan, a quiet sorrow that contrasted sharply with the thunderous end of the battleship. For many, the Yamato became a symbol not just of military might, but of the profound human cost of war. The Yamato holds a unique place in naval history, not just as a ship, but as an idea. It was conceived as the ultimate battleship, a testament to engineering ambition and national pride. Its sheer size, unparalleled armament, and thick armor were meant to project an image of invincibility. Yet, its ultimate destruction by air power redefined naval warfare forever. The lessons learned from its construction and its ultimate destruction showcased the rapid evolution of military technology and strategy. It became a clear example of how quickly even the most advanced weapons can become obsolete when faced with new realities. Its cultural impact is still felt today, appearing in countless books, films, and anime, often portrayed as a tragic hero or a symbol of Japan's wartime struggles. These portrayals keep its story alive, ensuring that its legacy continues to resonate with new generations. Reflecting on the Yamato, one can see it as a monument to both incredible engineering and tragic folly. The immense resources, both human and material, poured into its creation were staggering. It represented the pinnacle of industrial capability and strategic ambition for Japan. Yet the paradox of its power lay in its ultimate futility. Designed for a grand fleet engagement that never came, it was instead sent on a suicidal mission, outmatched by an enemy that had already moved beyond the battleship era. Its strength became its weakness, its armor and guns unable to counter the relentless aerial attacks. The Yamato was built for a different kind of war, one that had already passed. The enduring memory of the metal screams as Yamato's hull finally broke serves as a chilling reminder. It speaks to the costs of war, the relentless march of technological change and the human element at the heart of every conflict. That sound, a testament to immense forces tearing apart the strongest man-made structure of its time, marked the end of an era. It was a sound that echoed not just across the East China Sea that day, but through the annals of military history, forever altering the course of naval strategy. The Yamato, once a symbol of unyielding power, became a poignant symbol of the limits of that power, a testament to the fact that even the grandest creations can be brought down. Its story continues to remind us that progress, especially in warfare, is often paid for with immense sacrifice and profound change, leaving behind the wreckage of old ideas and the quiet, somber legacy of those who fought under them.